The First Great War for Scottish independence had begun a few years earlier, in 1296. Revolts against the English invasion began in 1297, led by William Wallace and Andrew de Murray. Murray and Wallace would push back the English host. During the Battle of Stirling Bridge, Murray would be mortally wounded. Wallace continued the war, and in 1298 was granted the title Guardian of Scotland. Eventually, Wallace was captured by the English in 1305. He was tortured and murdered, his eviscerated body split into 4 parts and displayed in English forts. But this was far from the end of the war, for in the north, a new claimant to the throne of Scotland had appeared, Robert the Bruce. Bruce had become Guardian of Scotland after Wallace, and was crowned King of Scotland in 1306. He would continue the campaign, began by Wallace and Murray, and aimed to free his country from oppression. This brief summary of Scottish history sets the scene for the tale I will tell today. Sir James Douglas and the Arrows of Fate. Throughout Bruce's campaign, he had a loyal captain second only to himself. This man was Sir James Douglas. He was known to be one of the greatest knights in Scotland, but this was not for his ability to command men, but for his mastery of fear as a tool of war and his personal ferocity in battle. There was very few Englishmen that crossed swords with Douglas and lived to tell the tale. Many in Scotland knew him as Good Sir James, as he had always championed the Bruce's claim for the throne. For years, Douglas would hold the border between Scotland and England. On many occasions, he would lead raiding parties south into Northumbria. The English of the border feared Sir Douglas so much, they thought of him as some form of demon. It was then he was given the moniker of the Black Douglas, since all the people of England knew that death followed wherever the Douglas went. Douglas and his men were stationed at a military fort near Jedburgh on the Scottish border. There had been many days of marching and fighting, so this night Douglas returned to the fort to allow his weary men rest. During the bright moonlit night, Douglas would walk among the tents and allow himself to become lost in thought. It was then, from the corner of his eye, he spied a strange sight. An old and crooked woman was approaching him. She stumbled forward, leaning on a large wooden staff. His eyes were drawn to her left hand, which held 3 English-made cloth-yard arrows. "Are you he who calls himself Good Sir Douglas?" said the woman. "That I am," replied the Douglas. "Why are you here? Have you wandered from the Sulters' camp?" "I don't belong to the merchants' camp," the woman answered. "I am a resident of these lands, and have lived here since King Alexander passed the door of my cottage with his beautiful French bride. All I have suffered that day lies between me and heaven." She held up the 3 arrows, and Sir James could clearly see the blood that covered them. "You have lost sons to the war, I presume," said Sir James. "You have guessed what part of my woes," replied the woman. She separated out the arrows and pointed at them one at a time. "This arrow carries upon it the blood from the pierced heart of my firstborn. The second is coated by the red stream which drew life from my second-born. The last arrow is red with the gore my youngest lay in, as he parted with his life and rendered me childless. They were shot by English hands, in different armies, in different battles. I am a good and honest woman, Sir James. I only wish to return to the English what belongs to the English, and in the same manner as they were sent. And I know that the dreaded Black Douglas has the keenest sight and strongest arm in all Scotland. I can think of no better man to execute my commission." Douglas stood in silence for a moment, contemplating his answer to the woman. Eventually the quiet was broken, and Douglas said, "I grieve for your sons, for many have been lost. But dear woman, I do not use the bow. In my hands I take the dagger or the battle axe. You must ask some other soldier to return your arrows to the English." At this, a strange smile appeared in the face of the woman. "I will not take them home," she said. while laying the 3 blood-covered arrows at the feet of Douglas. "You will see me again," said the woman, "on the evening of the Feast of St. James." With this, she turned about and hobbled away, stick in hand. The Black Douglas, now alone, thought it would be a great pity to leave the arrows lying forgotten upon the floor, so he picked them up and found a small empty quiver for them. He returned to his quarters and stored the quiver alongside his saddlebags. He lay down to rest, but this night sleep would escape him, as the old woman's request occupied his mind throughout the moonlit hours. As day broke over the camp, a messenger arrived. Quickly, this man was shown to the Douglas's tent. He told Sir James that a great force of nearly 10,000 English had crossed the border. This host was led by Sir Thomas de Ridgemont, an English knight and nobleman. The messenger mentioned that the army would have to navigate a narrow pass between 2 large hills, and there Sir James's men could attack with great advantage. With all haste, Douglas ordered his men to the narrow pass. On arrival, Douglas had a cunning plan. He commanded his men to twist together the young birch trees on either side of the passage once the enemy had passed, to prevent their escape. He then concealed all of his archers up on the hills. As the English entered the pass, their ranks were closed in tight and there was no room for the cavalry to manoeuvre. As the final Englishman entered the pass, there was a great yell, "A Douglas! A Douglas!" The battle cry of the Black Douglas. A flight of arrows poured in from every direction. As the Englishmen looked up, they saw the Black Douglas leading his men in full charge down the pass. The English began to flee down the path, but were blocked in and still suffering a hail of arrows. In the ensuing melee, the Black Douglas would find the very heart of Sir Thomas de Ridgemont with his beloved dagger. Not long after this victory, word reached Douglas that the governor of Berwick, Sir Edmund de Colon, a knight of Gascony, sought to battle the famous knight, the Black Douglas. Sir Edmund had led raids into Scotland and was heard to lament the fact he never came across Douglas. Sir James thought it would be a great pity for the knight's taunt to go unanswered. The morning after hearing the news, Douglas rallied his men and set forth for the Gascon's last known position. Scouts had reported that Sir Edmund had just passed Teviotdale, loaded with the plunder of his recent raid. Teviotdale was only a 5 or 6 hour march from the camp at Jedburgh, and it didn't take long for the Douglas to catch up with the foreign knight. "It would be a shame for you to return to England without receiving all you came for, brave knight of Gascony," said Sir James. The English party stopped dead in their tracks, and the men looked with mounting anxiety at the dark countenance of the Black Douglas and his men, heading straight towards them. Douglas called to Sir Edmund and offered him the fight he'd wanted, a duel to the death, but whether through fear or sheer cowardice, Sir Edmund gave his men the order to attack. Even from the beginning of the English onslaught, Douglas headed straight for Edmund. With a dark madness in his eyes, Douglas first downed the knight's horse with a blow from his battle axe. Sir Edmund's life was taken by the trusty dagger of the Black Douglas. "So much for the taunt of a knight of Gascony," cried the Douglas. On seeing their commander laid low, the remaining English ran. They returned to England to tell the tale of the fool who taunted the Black Knight. Even upon hearing these terrible tales of the Black Douglas, the lust for fame and honour that dwells within men would always reappear. Enter Sir Robert Neville, the so-called Peacock of the North. He, much like Sir Edmund, let it be known that he wished to fight the Douglas. But Sir Robert went as far to send a messenger to the Black Douglas. "Come, Black Knight of the North, and display your banner before the town of Berwick." Douglas rejoiced in the challenge and set forth at once for Berwick. On his arrival, he planted the banner of the 3 stars and beckoned for the knight to come fight him. But brave Sir Robert would not leave his castle. He decided to wait. Angered over facing yet another coward, Douglas sent his men to burn the village beneath the battlements and plunder the outlying villages. When Neville heard of this, he thought there was no better time to attack. Many of Douglas's men were away to the other villages. Neville sallied out with a formidable force of fighting men. As soon as the men left the fortification, They were assailed by the battle cry, "A Douglas," and at the front of the few men still with him, the Black Douglas charged. Hearing the cries of battle, many of the Douglas's men hurried back and joined the fight. Douglas would succeed in forcing Sir Robert Neville into a personal encounter, and once again the skillful blade of the Scottish knight found the heart of his enemy. Neville was slain, and victory went to Sir James Douglas. Finally, after all the pain and toil of the last while, returned to his fort near Jedburgh to take some well-deserved rest. Once again, Douglas walked between the soldiers' tents and stared at the bright moonlit sky. From the corner of his eye, he saw a strange old woman heading towards him. It was the same woman he'd met many nights ago. "Tomorrow is the feast of St. James," the woman said. "I told you I would see you this night, and I am good to my word. Have you returned the arrows I left with you to the English that sent them to the hearts of my sons?" "I have not," said Sir James. "I told you before, I do not fight with the bow." The woman, with a look of confusion, said, "You must then return the arrows to me." Douglas, more than willing, led the woman to his tent and found the small quiver that had been in his saddlebag. On removing the arrows from the quiver, he was surprised to see that they were all broken. All 3 arrows were split through the middle. "How could this happen?" the Douglas said. "Their fate is fulfilled," cried the woman, laughing with a wicked cackle. "That broken arrow came from the bow of a soldier of Richmond, the second from a soldier of Colon, and the third from a soldier of Neville. They are all now dead, and I am avenged." Before Douglas had the chance to reply, the woman scattered the broken fragments of the arrows on the floor and exited the tent. Douglas went to follow, but when he stepped out of the tent, the woman was nowhere to be seen. This tale is one of my personal favourites. It is a mix of historical accuracy and complete fiction. It is a Scottish legend told to the young about one of the many old heroes that fought long and hard to rid this land of oppression. What is true is that the Black Douglas was a great warrior. He served as captain to Robert the Bruce all throughout the war. And as Bruce lay dying on the 7th of June, 1329, he asked his greatest ally and friend, Sir James Douglas, to take his heart to the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. En route to the Holy Land, Sir James was killed in the Battle of Teba. But to this day, the banner and crest of the Clan Douglas has upon it, beneath the stars of Sir James, the red heart of Robert the Bruce, King of Scots. In the great stories told of the First War for Scottish independence, many names are overlooked. Most know of only Wallace or Bruce, but it would be a great pity for them not to know the name Sir James Douglas, the dreaded Black Knight of Scotland. When I began writing this video a week ago, I had planned on thanking everyone for getting me to 500 subscribers. I'm unsure what happened, or what continues to happen, but I would like to thank you all. At the time of writing this, I have 1,734 subs. Thanks for listening, and I hope you continue to enjoy the videos. I'll leave you with a few lines that English mothers would say to their children during the early days of the 14th century. "Hush ye, little pet ye. Hush ye, do not fret ye. The Black Douglas shall not get ye." Thank you for listening.